Hi everyone, I'm Sandra Thomas and I'm from the Battery Stewardship Council. I'll be your moderator today for this important topic, battery-related fires, how do we mitigate the risk? Just want to remind everyone that you can use Slido to ask any questions. We will go to questions at the end of, or towards the end of the session. I'll allow half an hour for questions. We'll be using that as the main means of taking questions, not a roving mic on this one. Can I please welcome my panellists up onto the stage? I'd like to thank each of my panellists for joining me today. I really appreciate your support. I'll introduce Kathy Gwinter, Director, Major Programs, New South Wales EPA. Phoebe Ash, Acting Director, Circular Economy Policy, New South Wales EPA. Libby Chaplin, my boss, CEO, Battery Stewardship Council. Zoltan Sekula, ANZ Product Stewardship Manager, Batteries E-Waste EcoCycle. And Brett Lehman, Executive Director, Waste Contractors and Recyclers Association of New South Wales. I'll pass it over to each of you to give a full more introduction and a little bit about what you do. Thanks.
Good morning, my name is Zoltan Sekula. I'm the Product Stewardship Manager for EcoCycle. I'm an electronic service engineer by trade and landed in the recycling industry back in 2006. These days I look after product stewardship portfolios for EcoCycle on NTCRS and B-Cycle. I'm involved in collaboration projects with government and industry stakeholders, progressing regulatory and product stewardship reform for the safe collection, transportation and recycling of consumer industrial batteries. And we specialise in the recovery of valuable resources and critical metals and address significant environmental and safety challenges for the waste management industry and local governments nationally.
Hi, my name is Kathy Junta. I'm the Director of Major Programs at the EPA. My role in batteries is the Household Problem Waste Program, which includes the network of 101 community recycling centres across the state, as well as the weekend household chemical clean-out events, is in my branch. We are currently running an embedded batteries trial through 21 of those CRCs, and we're also working through with our corporate affairs team on the next iteration of a campaign to talk to people about not binning their batteries.
Hi there, I'm Libby Chaplin, CEO of the Battery Stewardship Council. CEO of the Battery Stewardship Council and administrator of B-Cycle, which is the official national scheme for batteries stewardship in Australia. We've a pretty young scheme. We've been going for just over 3 years, and we've been able to create in that time one of the most accessible networks of battery drop-off points across the country. That's really relying on our partners in industry, EcoCycle being one, to roll out a broad network of drop-off points. We've collected more than 300 million batteries in that time. And that would be a great outcome if we hadn't had such a big change in the risk profile of this product. And so that's really why we're advocating for change, and we're really excited to be working with the New South Wales EPA and moving to a regulated space where we can really ensure that we can accelerate that change and really build on the successful foundation that we've created.
Hi everyone. Mine works. I'm Phoebe Ash. I lead the Circular Economy Policy function at the New South Wales EPA. And our role is to protect people and the environment from harm. So we take a real risk focus in our work, and we've been setting up a mandatory product stewardship framework to help manage that risk. Been doing some deep listening with stakeholders, looking at trying to balance the good with the harm. So we know that batteries will help us decarbonise our economy, and we're expecting rapid growth, 300% in some sectors. So we don't really want to stifle that innovation, but we want to manage the risk where there is harm. And we're seeing significant risk. So many speakers have talked about the deaths that we've seen in New South Wales, some in Lake Macquarie, some in Western Sydney, many injuries, first responders being exposed to harmful chemicals in their skin, breathing, and significant property damage, millions, tens of millions of dollars. And our fire and rescue colleagues in New South Wales tell us that the battery fires are being caused by e-micromobility, so e-bikes, e-scooters, hoverboards, and consumer electronics, so vapes, electric toothbrushes, power tools. They're presenting the highest risks, those categories, so they've been our focus. And the consequences of not acting are significant for current and future generations, something that we take really seriously. And doing nothing's not really an option now. So we'll be talking more about what we've been doing.
Thank you. So I'm Brett Lemin, the Executive Director of WACRA, or the Waste Contractors and Recyclers Association of New South Wales and ACT. So we represent around about 90% of the waste and recycling industry across the state of New South Wales and ACT, from transporters, collectors, processors, recyclers, right across the board. So my members are those that are experiencing around 10 to 12,000 fires a year from battery-related fires. And so we're really pleased to see the progress that's going on with New South Wales with the battery mandatory program, and we look forward to working together with government to get it sorted. But we are also spending a lot of time and resources in developing training, SOPs, etc. for industry as we tackle the real danger that comes from incorrectly disposed of batteries when they go into thermal runaway. Some of the research that we're finding and working with Fire Rescue New South Wales is quite alarming, and making sure that our industry is equipped properly to protect its people. So that's it from me.
Thank you, everyone. Now, to kickstart off the conversation, I'll provide a few anecdotes just to provide some context. Many in this room will have an electric vehicle or e-bike or e-scooter, even maybe a battery for solar energy storage or for camping. In preparing for this panel, I came across some other obscure items where we can now find batteries. In jackets, which can take photographs or play music, wearable fitness rings, medical wearables, e-tags. E-tags, maybe not so obscure, but not so obvious either. The point is, batteries are part of everyone's everyday. BSC Consumer Research, undertaken in 2024 by Mobium Consumer Research, reported that each Australian household has on average 11 items that contain removable batteries, equating to over 106 million items across the nation. Scary figures. ACOR's paper, A Burning Issue, Navigating the Battery Crisis in Australia's Recycling Sector, has published that by 2036, lithium-ion battery waste will reach 137,000 tonnes, which will continue to increase year on year. For context, financial year 2024, Battery Stewardship Council reported a figure of 19,000 tonnes of battery waste. We can see how quickly our volumes are going to increase as we all adopt this new way of living. Unfortunately for us, many of these batteries end up in the general waste stream, and we're all aware of the risks that this is presenting to society in the form of regular fires in our garbage trucks and at our waste storage and processing facilities. A New South Wales Fire and Rescue report found that between 2022 and 2023, the number of fire incidents relating to lithium-ion batteries in waste collection system increased by 62%. 27% of this is in waste trucks and 50% in waste facilities. The total number of incidents over the 2 years equating to 31 fires where lithium-ion batteries or lithium-ion battery devices were found to be the cause. This is creating serious problems and driving up costs for local councils, waste collection services and facility operators, as well as introducing a serious risk to the health and wellbeing of those working in the industry, as we have heard over the last couple of days. During this panel session today, we're going to hear more about these challenges and the solutions from our panellists, who bring frontline experience and insights from across the sector. So Zoltan, are you able to talk to what's the cause of some of these fires that are emerging across the industry?
Thank you very much. And may I just ask for the presentation? Okay. So I'm going to have to take you on a bit of a journey, and just bear with me because batteries are not just batteries. It's electrochemistry, and I need to give you a bit of an insight on what we're dealing with and why some of the batteries are more dangerous than others. So what's important to know is that we've only started our journey with the problems that we're experiencing in the waste management industry with the lithium batteries. The curve is still rising. Everything that you buy, everything that you can see is basically lithium-ion battery driven. So batteries store electrical energy in chemical form. That's really important to remember. So lithium batteries are safe, but they're only safe when they're used to specifications that the manufacturer has given. Since 2019, lithium-ion batteries have gone through a huge research program, and they're effective, they're relatively cheap, and they're commonplace. So we're dealing primarily with two categories of lithium batteries. We have the lithium batteries and lithium metal batteries, and there's a significant difference between the two of them. And this is what's actually coming in every device that you have in your possession. So end-of-life batteries are found in every waste stream, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about MSW, CNI, CND, or FOGO, in cardboard and plastics, they're absolutely everywhere. So just to be clear, batteries are safe if they're used according to the specifications. So what can't you do with the batteries? You can't overcharge them, so always use the right charger that comes with your batteries. You should not over-discharge them, which brings them into a state below their stability. Do not short-circuit the batteries, so don't put them anywhere where the contacts, the positive and negative terminal, could short-circuit because there's a lot of energy contained. And do not leave your batteries in the sun or close to a heat source. 45 degrees is roughly your maximum you should expose lithium batteries to. At 80 degrees, it becomes really tricky. At 125, you have a problem. Certainly, we have a big problem with batteries returning to the waste management industry that are swollen. So they have already gone past their safe stage. Damaged batteries, and also batteries that have potentially been dropped or have holes in their cases and are exposed. So as a quick at home, what I suggest is always have a bucket of sand or a bucket of water just in case something happens. Know where it is and know what to do with your batteries. Dunk it in the water or bury it in sand. Now, and also, yeah, obviously, walk away. Walk away. If you can't treat the fire or the implosion that's happening, do not put yourself at risk. Now, this is not, something I'll tell you because it's new knowledge. It's written on every battery pack, but it's in font size 1.5, right? And unless you have a magnifying glass or pay attention, most people don't actually read it. Here's some of the examples. So when you talk to me about lithium-ion batteries, to me, that doesn't mean anything. It's a whole family of batteries, and all batteries have a different risk profile. So we're dealing with nickel-cobalt batteries, nickel-manganese batteries, nickel-cobalt oxide batteries, lithium polymer batteries, lithium iron phosphate batteries, titanium oxide batteries, manganese oxide batteries, sulfur dioxide, thionyl chloride. And the last is the lithium metal polymer solid-state batteries, which is a new technology that's coming, and it's going to present a particular high risk for landfill management. Batteries by design always have a fuse that should actually enable the rest of the world to be protected from any mishaps. What that means is the fuse here, for example, this is a prismatic cell. This fuse is going to open up if you short-circuit the battery, and in theory, nothing happens. But the energy that's charged in the body of the battery is still available. So if you breach the battery walls, that battery energy is going to be instantaneously discharged. They come in all shapes and sizes. So this battery here is your standard cylindrical battery. This battery here is a commercial transport battery. It's about 1.5 meters long, about 800 millimeters wide, and about 300 millimeters tall. Now, the thermal runaway event, which has been coined officially, what actually happens is the battery sits quite happily at ambient temperature, and when it goes into distress, and that can take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, it doesn't really matter, it's exothermic, so it generates its own heat. And the chemical process continues until it gets to about 80 degrees. There's a little bit of dip, but when it gets to 125 degrees, it goes from 125 to well over 600 degrees in less than 3 seconds. The whole event could be as short as 6 to 8 minutes. Now, if the batteries, for example, sit in a cell or a cluster of batteries, like you have in e-mobility or larger batteries as such, should you have a thermal runaway and the battery is under stress right in the middle, and it goes off into thermal runaway, it will take all the other cells with it. And this is just a temperature chart and the following consequences of what happens. In this case, the fire was put out, so the temperature has been dropped, but overall, it just goes through the process until all energy is burnt out. The research has been done, you can read it all, it's well publicised, but what's important about this chart is we are creating a lot of hazardous gases. Now, normally those gases are contained within the battery pack, but they're also highly flammable. So if the battery is at high temperature, those gases are going to ignite. For my example, I've chosen a very common battery. This battery is only 65 millimetres tall, 18 millimetres in diameter. It's 18650. The 18650 is a format. In our world, we're dealing with formats, right? So if you describe a battery to me, right, it has all specifications. So the 18650 is one, but we have various other categories. So I can actually give you a quote for the battery once it's submitted to recycling on how much it's actually going to cost you to recycle. So in this case, low voltage, 2.5 volts to 4.2 volts. So it's safe, critically. Now, this is an example on what happens in a waste compactor. Should a battery be incorrectly disposed with general waste and it reaches the compactor and it gets crushed, okay? So this is in contact with other combustible material and subsequently we have the various fires. In the process, the battery generates a lot of gases. Approximately 2 litres of gas per amp of battery. That probably doesn't mean much to you. Let's assume that it's a lot of gas. But the gas formation contains hydrogen fluoride, which is highly corrosive and toxic, carbon monoxide, which is obvious, hydrogen cyanide, hydrogen chloride, sulfur dioxide, and methane, and a lot of hydrogen. Everything is flammable. Now, if you get in contact or you happen to be near this fire, this is what I'm saying. Unless you have a chemical respirator at hand, you are going to be robbed of fresh air. Okay? It is significant. This is an example of what happened at one of our customer sites. And this goes back a couple of years, but these things happen at landfill. Now, this was an energy storage device that was accidentally crushed. This is the intensity. So an energy storage device in a domestic environment contains about 3.3 kilowatt, roughly, and that's 3,300 watts. Now, when you can calculate it out, that will create significant energy release and gas. Now, in this case, the operator is very skillful, and lithium-ion battery fires are extremely difficult to put out. What you need to achieve is cool the batteries as soon as possible. But if you put a little bit of water onto it, it will actually come back with a vengeance. If you are successful, and this guy's really good, by the way, so there happens to be a 1,000-litre IBC tank with water, okay? Okay? Now, a lot of landfill and transfer stations don't have that capability. And this is where the problem starts. So once the fire starts, generally speaking, a fire doubles in size every 30 to 60 seconds. In a lithium battery, right, it's instantaneous. So as far as thermal runaway is concerned, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sultan. That's great. Great explanation. So the cost of a fire is significant, as we've heard many times. New South Wales Fire and Rescue reported that it costs up to $173,000 to rebuild a waste collection vehicle damaged by fire. On top of that, there's growing indirect costs such as rising insurance costs, that's if you can get insurance, and operational costs. Now, Brett, you've got a number of members that are facing these costs. What sort of incidents are you seeing from member reports and across the industry, and what are some of the implications?
No worries. So look, we're seeing fires occur every single day across the industry, whether it's in vehicles or at recycling facilities. Thankfully, a lot of the time, they're relatively small and handled pretty quickly. But what we do see when you have, especially a truck go into thermal runaway, you're on really limited time. So once you've got a battery go off in the back of a truck, you can imagine it's full of plastic and other highly calorific items that are going to burn hot and burn quickly and create their own toxic gases as well. So we are seeing lots of truck damage, which also has further implications. Like a truck, side load truck, you're probably looking $500,000, $500,000 that can be written off within seconds. But there's a further impact to that because you have loss of productivity. One of the local governments actually recently this year lost one of their trucks to a battery fire, and they couldn't find a replacement anywhere. They looked across all of New South Wales and all of Australia to find a replacement truck, and they could not find one. So that had a real impact on residents of that particular council because there was no spare trucks because they've all been taken up because everyone else's trucks have burnt down or are off getting repaired. So you've got a real impact onto the service that is being offered to people because there's no vehicles to collect them. We're now also starting to see the implications on drivers. So there's drivers that are actually off on PTSD leave because they've had multiple fires, multiple close calls. And the psychological impact of having a fire in your vehicle when you're surrounded by other people is pretty intense. You know, there's a lot of emotion running high. There's drivers getting abused by passers-by as well, and they're in real panic. Your truck's on fire, you're in the middle of residential streets. What are you going to do? You know, you've got to find somewhere safe to tip it off. You don't always know where the safest and closest location is. So it's a really highly stressful scenario when you've got a truck coming that's on fire. We are starting to see, and actually props to ACT government, they're actually starting to nominate some areas where drivers can go when these happen. Now, I mean, I live in the Blue Mountains, for example. There's not a lot of safe places you can go if you've got a truck that goes into thermal runaway, especially in summer. So it's really starting to plan those operations out of what you can do when the worst case scenario happens. We're also seeing at the actual facilities, you know, the cost of fire protection is expensive. The cost of PPE is really expensive. When we're talking about not just the fire risk that comes from battery fires, but the gas risk is probably something that everyone needs to get better at. You know, Zoltan touched on some of the gases there. You know, hydrogen fluoride gas is pretty nasty stuff. You don't need a whole lot of exposure to that gas before you have some serious health implications. That particular gas can be absorbed in through the skin, so a respirator is not going to help you that much in this scenario. And basically what it does is it leaches the calcium from your bones. The only treatment is if you're quick, direct calcium injection to the bone so they can try and put more in that it's sucking out, or amputation. Right? So this is a serious safety risk to these people. And that's why it's really important that when there is thermal runaway, you don't just stay out of the way of the flames, stay out of the smoke because it is incredibly toxic. You know, we're seeing that the smoke as well, it's around, depending on the battery chemistry, so it's sort of averaging out these percentages here, but around 30% of the gas produced is hydrogen. Hydrogen is highly flammable, you could say explosive. So when you think about a garbage truck, you've got 30% hydrogen gas building up in the back of that truck. You've potentially got an explosive truck. So you need to really manage those things. You know, we're dealing with manufacturers, the body manufacturers now, looking at different technologies, different ways to try and mitigate those risks for not just the drivers and the plant and operations, but also the general public and safety. Insurance skyrocketed. You know, some of my members are seeing insurance go up around about 600% in the last couple of years, purely based on fires. So the costs are massive. You know, it's hundreds of millions of dollars just to the state of New South Wales. So you'd be talking billions and billions of dollars to the Australian economy is caused by battery fires. And it's only getting worse. It's going up, not down.
Thanks, Brett. It's quite eye-opening. Now, what can we do to reduce this risk? We all understand that risk is typically assessed as a combination of likelihood and consequence in its most simplistic state. Mitigating risk then requires us to reduce either the likelihood of an event occurring or the consequences if one does. Libby, what are the key risks across the life cycle of a battery and what can we do to mitigate this risk?
So I think Zoltan really pointed out the fact that we have, it's not just a battery, right? There's a whole huge range of battery products that are now being part of our daily lives. So the risk varies according to product type, but it also varies depending on what stage it is in our use of it. So we have a risk at the very beginning when we purchase a product. We get to decide where we invest our money, and buying good quality products from a known source makes it a much higher likelihood that we've got a good quality product. And so I think really making that conscious decision when you're buying a product to really buy a product that is of a known source and a good quality. That's going to reduce the fire risk. Obviously design, we don't have a lot of influence in Australia, so I'm not going to talk to that too much. But the next really big piece is using that product, and Zoltan pointed out, the big risk of not charging a battery correctly. So always be using the right charger, the charger that came with the product, not doing it in an unsupervised way, making sure that you're around when it's charging, and doing it in a non-flammable area. The next stage really is disposal, and I think Brett really pointed out why we need to really change behaviour in this space. We need to really help the community to understand that a battery is not just a battery. We need to help them understand that the risk profile has changed. We're used to, 20 years ago it just was not an issue. Alkaline batteries had a small risk because they could create a spark, but we've moved into a whole different realm. So we need significant investment in behavioural change in order to ensure that the community understands the risks and then are also motivated to change their behaviour. And that means putting them into a dedicated drop-off chain, whether it be B-Cycle or Mobile Muster or one of the other dedicated recycling networks that are designed to really manage this risk. And that means that we will also need to invest in incentives of some sort to really to make this transition a more speedy transition. And then obviously from a B-Cycle's perspective, we are very committed to safety throughout the whole network, and so we work with our partners to provide tools like risk assessments. We have a drop-off point code of practice that lays out the safety requirements. There's a drop-off point risk and safety plan that needs to be prepared. There's online training, but there's a lot more that we can do to really raise the profile on the ground. And so we're really looking to, expand our communications and education piece to improve that and ensure that all of you have the tools you need when you go back to your workplaces to ensure that the workforces that we are, connecting with are safe. So I think there is a huge amount that we can do, and the real challenge, I think, is how do we make that happen? And stewardship, we've been working obviously in a voluntary capacity, and we've achieved a lot, but as I said, it's not adequate to really address this risk. And so making sure that we have regulation is a key piece, and New South Wales has led the way. But we really all need to be going back and talking to our state-based partners in government and encouraging them to also implement state-based regulation, or the new federal government to do a similar approach. Because this is an urgent issue and we need to really put measures in place much more quickly in order to reduce that risk.
Yeah, I think we all couldn't agree more, Libby. Thanks for that. Now, Brett, we mentioned before, you've got a lot of members that are facing this risk every day. What are some of the mitigation measures that they're implementing to help address and keep their employees safe?
No worries. I mean, look, the first thing is having a properly structured SOP and plan. So understanding...
Sorry, just to say it's a standard operating procedure.
Sorry, yes. Understanding what the risks are, what you can control and what you can't control. You can have the best laid plan, and it's only useful if you use it. It's no point being a piece of paper locked in a cupboard. But understanding the risks around the flame, as well as the gas risk, and implementing that and making sure that everybody's trained correctly to understand what they're going to do. That's the first step. When we start then looking at technologies, so if we start at a collection vehicle, for example, there's different sensor technology. Standard practice for industry for decades for fire safety has been a carbon monoxide sensor. So when it detects carbon monoxide, it will sound an alarm, which generally means there's a fire occurring. Now, with a normal truck fire from years gone by, like when someone's thrown brake fluid and chlorine in a bin, and they've reacted and caused the fire, carbon monoxide sensor works perfectly fine. When a battery goes into thermal runaway, once it's producing carbon monoxide, it's way too late. Thermal runaway is well and truly underway. So things like hydrogen gas sensors are much more useful when it comes to lithium-ion batteries, but they also have their limitations. One, they're about 3 times more expensive, and 2, they have a much smaller operating area, around about 4 cubic meters, sorry. So to have one in a truck, that's one thing. To have one at a MRF facility, you're going to need multiples where one carbon monoxide sensor previously would have worked. Things like thermal cameras do a lot of fantastic work. Anyone who's had a look at the Canberra MRF fire document that ACT Fire Rescue did, the thermal camera images from that is a great indication of how good thermal imaging cameras can be to help. We're starting to see AI technology is also starting to trickle in with truck collection cameras to detect batteries or items that contain batteries as they're getting flipped into the trucks or as they're running past on the conveyor belts on the at the MRF itself. So there's a lot of emerging technology coming through. There's a lot of stuff that's been around forever, but the technology will only get you so far. Making sure you've got the correct PPE is another big one. You know, when I'm going out to members, even transfer stations, noting there's a lot of local governments in the room at the moment, the PPE that a lot of people are supplying to their workers is not adequate when it comes to battery fires. Even from the flame risk, it's not rated to a high enough temperature for the potential flames that they're going to be exposed to. So I'd really encourage everybody to make sure that they have appropriate equipment available to their workers for when these types of things occur. So you really need to have a look and review everything that you've got. Those that are WACRA members, we're constantly updating our SOPs for our members for vehicles and facilities. So we do a lot of that work for you. We work really closely with Fire Rescue New South Wales to ensure that what we're telling you to do is the latest and greatest information. But what we are finding is this stuff is expensive, but it will impact your insurance premium. So having things like thermal cameras, remote firefighting equipment and stuff like that will definitely impact your insurance premiums on a positive note rather than a negative, which is nice for once. There's lots of things you can do. There's no one silver bullet solution because these batteries come in all different shapes and sizes, all different chemical compounds, and we don't know what they're burning next to. So you've got the other thing. It's not just the battery burning. It's whatever other weird and wonderful thing someone's put in their bin at the same time. So there are lots of things that you can do, but they're all going to be lots of individual things because there's not one silver bullet to control the risk for these.
Thanks, Brett. And for those who are involved in municipal waste collection, get in touch with Brett because his SOP is going to be signed off by New South Wales Fire and Rescue. So it will give you some good guidance into what to do in the case of a fire in a truck. Now, processing lithium-ion batteries presents a different set of risks, I'm sure, Zoltan. Zoltan, an EcoCycle who he works for, collects waste from, or batteries directly from customers as opposed from curbside. So slightly different risk profile. I'll hand it over to you to talk to what you see and how you mitigate.
Thank you very much. So in our operation, we use thermal imaging cameras, as you mentioned. We have fire rovers, which are 20-foot containers filled with F500 and a water cannon that shoots about 42 metres. And that's monitored 24/7. We have multiples of those. It's effective in treating our fire risks at our yards, but it has limitations, right? It's a 360-degree type boom. It's about, I think it's about 5 metres tall. But at the end of the day, it can't see everything. So we have thermal imaging cameras right through the facilities, right, with the AI behind it so that if there is an event and unexpected temperature rise, we will get notified. We have automatic gates so that the fire brigade can get access to all our facilities, right, and they have plans and they came to visit and they basically know where the stuff is. At the end of the day, the facilities, I believe, that we have and the equipment that we have engaged makes us relatively safe, We haven't had any serious incidents as yet. and we're trying to manage the risk really at the front end, right? So the biggest problem we have is that we don't understand the history of the batteries. By the time the batteries arrived to me, they could have come from anywhere in Australia. So I would like to educate you on what you can do, local government can do, and private industry. If I may have access to the presentation. Yeah, we're good? Okay. You may or may not have seen the battery collection pins that we have deployed with oops. Where did they go? Okay, here we go. Battery collection bins that consumers have access to. So these bins are deployed in all major supermarkets and hardware stores, electrical stores. Pretty much you have a good chance if you go to a retail environment that's a larger chain, Bunnings certainly. All these battery bins are there, and we're trying to encourage consumers to bring the batteries back. These battery bins are made only for consumer-sized batteries, so they are not going to be taking e-mobility batteries, right? E-mobility batteries are already the next category of risk batteries that we are involved in. So the battery bins here were supposed to take batteries roughly hand tool size, maybe lawnmower battery, but that's before Bunnings rolled out all their big batteries because everybody's complaining that one battery is not big enough. So what they've done is they've increased the voltage to 58 volts and made the battery overall significantly more powerful. One of the challenges that I face is that I talk to people and, you know, I go, why don't you take your batteries to the supermarket? And I go, don't know, which supermarket? And I go, you know, we have about, you know, over 5,000 of these out there. I believe at the moment that the biggest problem that we're faced with is they're all in corporate colours. And if you go to Coles, the red and white melts into the wall. It sort of goes with all the advertising campaign, right? We have a Woolies bin, right? Generally, they're standing out at the service counter, but people don't pay any attention. Yes? Don't pay attention to it. So we have a lot of education to do. Irrespective that the facilities have been, or the bins have been rolled out, we are only at roughly 15% of available batteries that should be coming through the system, which means that 85% of handheld batteries are actually going to landfill. Now, in the commercial sense, if you are an LGA, we provide you with the galvanised bins. There's one at the front at our stand. These bins are the safest bins that you can engage with mixed battery collections. They're made out of 4mm steel, they're low conductivity, they're sealable, they're lockable, and if there's anything happening, the fire will be contained within the actual bin. Now, if you have a larger battery, and I'll just give you a snapshot here, the next one is an EV coffin. So for EV batteries, we deal with the manufacturers. They put it into one of those and makes it safe for transport. In case there's an accident or an EV battery that has been damaged in an accident situation, we can roll out the 20-foot containers, and they're all equipped with fire suppression agents and detection devices. The actual network that's available to consumers, the metro areas are extremely well covered. Right, so in our count, we have roughly about 7,800 locations that are involved with some sort of battery or recycling collection, right? You shouldn't have any problems. We have just started rolling out the same system in New Zealand, and overall, there's no excuse for the incorrect disposal of batteries. The collection network currently is not equipped to handle embedded batteries, so it only takes loose batteries that you can buy at the supermarket. Oops. Okay, now every battery bin has a smart sensor built in. So I can see every location, I can see the fill level, I can see the temperature, I know its GPS location, and it will notify me if there's an unexpected temperature event. It's the safest way that we can feed back to the store if there's anything going on. We can talk to the store, we can communicate to emergency services, and it has proven itself extremely effective. So to date, I can state that we haven't had any serious implications or any fire events in a retail environment. So we believe that the batteries at that stage are still treated nicely. Okay, they only drop into a bin, but they're not going into general waste where the waste compactor eventually crushes it, or when they go to landfill or into your transfer pit, the dozer comes along and runs over it 5 to 6 times to get the right density. Now, as far as safety equipment is concerned, there's a whole arsenal of new safety equipment coming on board because, as Brett mentioned, right, the current equipment is not able to stand the intensity of the fire for a long period of time. So you need to go with specialist fire retardant equipment. There is certainly battery buns that you can put onto an emerging fire. We also have commercial product, which is the cell block product that you can actually just spread over the fire, and it will encapsulate the flames and put out the fire. Now, for e-mobility batteries or larger batteries, we highly recommend that everybody looks at the newest technology that's available. In this example, this is a cell block bin. It actually got fire suppressant built onto the side. So if there's a thermal runaway happening of any battery that's of any significant size, it will actually release that product onto the battery and hopefully contain the fire within the container. Again, if you want to see any of it, it's at our display cabinet. Now, for apartment blocks, there's a particular problem, right? What do we recommend for people to keep their e-scooters safe and still charge them? There is various equipment that's coming on board. Again, this has built-in fire suppression systems, so if there is a thermal runaway in an apartment building, it is going to be dealt with automatically by the fire suppressant built in. And that's, I think, the best we can do at the moment. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Zoltan. Now, lithium-ion battery fire risk is, pardon the pun, hot on the government agenda at the moment, with New South Wales the first state to be progressing regulatory reform. Phoebe, can you explain how regulation is intended to work and how it will assist in mitigating the risk?
So Environment Ministers committed last year to urgent action to address this problem, and they also committed to a nationally aligned approach. They agreed in June that New South Wales would lead action with Victoria and Queensland. So we've been collaborating with our colleagues to deliver this work. We prepared a draft regulatory impact statement last year, and that contained different options for reform. So they had low intervention, which considered making mandatory existing product stewardship schemes, all the way through to a higher intervention, which could be setting up a new CDS style scheme. And all those options had a positive net present value, so the benefits outweighed the costs. We did a lot of engagement with stakeholders, and I want to thank the people in this room that have been part of that. I know it's been quite a significant time investment for you, and we've really appreciated it. Your perspectives helped us understand the risks and the benefits of action, and that's been huge. So we've had a series of roundtables, workshops, lots of one-on-one meetings with the waste and resource recovery industry, existing product stewardship organisations, environment groups, online platforms like Amazon and eBay, and other government agencies as well. And your input has shaped the cost-benefit analysis that went to Environment Ministers, as well as a market profile which has showed us what we're expecting in the future, where the growth is coming. So Environment Ministers considered that draft regulatory impact statement in December, and our New South Wales Minister committed to action in 2025. So in March this year, the Minister introduced the Product Life Cycle Responsibility Act, and that's designed to regulate any problematic product across its life cycle. 17 members spoke in Parliament. It was a lengthy debate. People wanted to have their say, and it was unanimously passed. It's been designed to be agile, act urgently, and scale up over time so that we can address the problem if it changes. You may have heard this week that it's been designed as a template for others to adopt. So we heard that there could be challenges with acting urgently, so that's why we've taken this approach. We've created a new standalone instrument that people can adopt in their own frameworks, and we've been working with our colleagues to help however we can. It's a framework that is really enabled by regulations to be made, and it creates concepts of a product stewardship organisation, a brand owner, action plans, and a series of minimum standards that people need to meet. It also has some design standard provisions in there for the future. Something important is that we have required brand owners to register before they supply a product into New South Wales, and that is an important oversight piece for us. We want to know what's coming into the market and what's likely to be problematic. And it sets up a blend of regulation and contract. A product stewardship organisation, for example, can enter an agreement with government in a similar way to the CDS scheme. One of the principles is that we want free riders to be compelled to participate. So that has been one of the limitations of voluntary product stewardship, and we're keen to have more money flowing through the system so that there's more money to educate people that there is a battery in a product and please don't put it in the bin, as well as more money to enable more collection points so that people can take products to those places. So we plan to be consulting on the first regulation soon, and that's what will trigger batteries to be captured in the framework. So the framework is agnostic as to product now, and then the first regulation will help us regulate for batteries. And we'll be focusing on e-bikes and consumer electronics first, because that's what fire and rescue tell us are the highest risk. So we're taking a risk-based approach to our policy. And some of the chemicals that Zoltan mentioned earlier are really hazardous and toxic, and we're wanting to keep them away from people and the environment. So this is one of the solutions that has been proposed.
Thanks very much, Phoebe, for that overview. We're really looking forward to the regulations. Now, moving to community behavioural change, it was touched on earlier that it's probably one of the most challenging things is to shift community and how we behave. According to Battery Stewardship Council's 2024 national survey conducted by independent research group, the Mobium Group, 43% of Australians still dispose of batteries in the household rubbish bin. 10% take them in the curbside, dispose of them in the curbside recycling bin, and only 36% take them to a battery collection point. While these numbers are improving, it is clear that as a community we still have a long way to go. Kathy, as we all know, shifting human behaviour is challenging. What interventions do you believe could help drive more people to dispose of their batteries at accredited drop-off points or safe drop-off points?
Yep. So the behaviour change challenge is it's a big one. And there are many behaviours that we need to change and for the community to adopt to get this right. So we've been working with Behaviour Works Australia, who have done a fair bit of research for us, looking at all of the desired behaviours that we need and assessing how best to build that into a campaign and into a program to collect more of the batteries. So the behaviours that we're looking at start in the home, and the very first thing is when a device is dead or no longer wanted is just getting people to stop and think, does this have a battery in it? So that's the very first behaviour that we need to tackle, because as everybody has said at this conference over the last couple of days, there are so many embedded batteries that people are just not even thinking that half the products in their house have batteries in them. So that's behaviour number one, is just stop and think, does this have a battery in it? The next is then to understand that product or that battery can't go into your curbside bins, neither the red nor the yellow. It needs to go somewhere unique for that battery to be collected and processed safely. So that's a behaviour number two, is for people to understand that is not where it should go. The next behaviour down the chain then is for them to safely store batteries at home, because they're not going to, as soon as that device is dead, go immediately and to a collection point. So the next one that we need to tackle is how to safely store your batteries at home until you're ready to take them, preferably with all your other household problem waste, to a community recycling centre or another battery drop-off site. So safe storage at home. Then, much like green bags, when we switched from plastic bags at the shopping centre, is remembering to take them with you. And that was a behaviour that we all had to face, was, remembering to take your green bags to the shopping centre. So we need people to remember when they do have a certain amount of batteries and they're ready to go, to actually put them in the car and take them with them to the Coles or Woolworths or wherever they're going to take them. And then when they are ready to do that, they need to know where to take them. So we need a universal sort of source of information for people so that they know where to go and take those batteries to, so that they can safely have them disposed of or recycled. And then they need to remember to do it. So another behaviour that we found was that people have packed up all their household problem waste, or they've taken their green bags, they're going to Woolworths, they've thrown their bag of batteries in the glove box or in the console or in the boot. They go and do their shopping, damn, I forgot the batteries again. So the batteries are then sitting in the car until next week when they go back to the grocery store again. So there's another behaviour there in just transporting those stored batteries to the site and remembering to actually take them and put them in the disposal point. So at every step of the way, there are a series of behaviours that we need people to adopt. So that's a challenge for all of us. So as I said, we've been working with Behaviour Works to identify all of that and start working through it, how best to get this sort of series of complicated behaviour change happening out there in the community. We've been workshopping that with many of you, councils, regional waste groups, B-Cycle have been involved in those workshops, so that we can understand the right messaging, the messaging that's going to work for the community at each of those points without overloading them with too much information, because we're also talking to them about a whole range of other things, and making sure that we can instill all of those behaviours. So that campaign has been tested. We're looking to launch next month, just in the next couple of weeks actually, launching that campaign. We'll do a short a small sort of burst before the end of this financial year. We will take the learnings and evaluation away from that, build it up, and then we'll run a larger campaign towards the end of the year. But we are also providing some funding to all of the regional groups who have community recycling centres in their area, so that they can boost that campaign in their local areas and regional areas. And I know we heard from Costa how important it is to get that localised messaging out there. So working very closely with our partners in council to boost that campaign once it's out in market.
Thanks very much for that, Kathy. Yeah, I must admit I'm guilty of ending up in the shopping centre. Damn, I've left my bags in the car. Damn, I left my batteries at home. So I think I'm one of those people in that study. But I do get there. Libby, B-Cycle. So what role has B-Cycle played in influencing community behaviour?
I think the key actions that we take, a lot of what Kathy has said really resonates with our objectives as well, and doing good research to make sure that we understand what it is that is motivating the consumer, what are the battery behaviours, and then how do we respond to that. I think it is worth noting, though, in the context of risk management, that it's one thing to educate the community, but our biggest challenge actually is paying for the collection and processing of those batteries. And that's one of the reasons why regulation is so important, to bring free riders on, to give us the funds so that we can be confident to educate the community and know that we can actually afford to pay for their safe recovery and ensure that they're being properly recycled. So over the past 12 months, we've been going through an extensive process of consultation, involving many of you in the room, and really looking at what are the challenges from a community perspective and how do we change that. I think it's also important to look at the risk from the perspective of the product again. When we've finished using a product, it still contains between 60 and 90% charge. And as a community, I think we aren't aware of that, and it's a big piece of information that we need to convey. And with a small battery, the best thing we can actually do is tape the terminals. And this is not something unique to Australia. I've worked in the US for 10 years. My e-waste companies that I worked with were constantly having their networks tape batteries. BBAT, which is one of the most progressive and most effective schemes globally, really encourages taping. And so as much as it seems like a small and challenging task, it actually does significantly reduce the risk. So that's one thing that we can really easily communicate to the community. Obviously, you know, we've got to stage our communications and we need to do it in a really strategic way, but it's, you know, buying product safety, storing, transporting, making sure that we're taking it to the right place, taping batteries, understanding that embedded batteries don't need to have taping, obviously, because the product is already doing that. Understanding that the big risk with embedded batteries is actually going into the waste and recycling centre and then the crushing happening there. So one of the big things that has come out of our consultation is where do we need to invest to really change behaviour? And so we've moved to an eco-modulated approach where with B-Cycle 2.0 there'll be a different levy associated with different chemistry types. Lithium batteries, for example, will have a higher levy so that we can actually have money to invest in communications. And we can also invest in incentives, not directly to the consumer because we don't want consumers hoarding batteries, but we can invest in rebates. For example, when a consumer goes back to a store, they could get a coupon to buy a new product that goes towards a new product. Or it could be a community-based incentive where we can actually invest in local community infrastructure for those communities that are having success stories around battery recovery. And then also having strong communications across different battery types. So B-Cycle's definitely progressing our model. That approach is actually with the ACCC at the moment, and we should know within a couple of months, we should have our determination from the ACCC. And the great thing about that, from our perspective, is that it really does nestle well with a regulatory reform approach. So all of those things that we are doing now and plan to do with B-Cycle 2.0 work well within a regulated framework, and you know, we believe that both of those things are absolutely essential for us to truly and quickly address the risk, because obviously a lot of what we've talked about today is that there is a real urgency here. We need to leverage what we've already established. You know, within B-Cycle we have 716 accredited organisations across the country. As we've talked about, a large number of drop-off points and you know, a lot of work to do around education, but all of that is already in place. The quickest way to move towards rapid diversion is to actually leverage those existing success stories.
Thank you, Libby. We all know many of our young ones are very good at educating us, so if we can get it into education programs at schools, I'm sure that will bring around some community change. I know I get in trouble from my daughter quite regularly for different things. We'll move to some questions now, so I dare say that will probably take up the rest of the session because we have a number here where, it sort of, makes sense. There's a fit for a certain person I'll direct, otherwise I'll just leave it open to the panel. So the one at the top at the moment with 10 likes, are there plans for a centralised, coordinated statewide comms plan, or campaign I should say, similar to Don't Be a Tosser or Need a Plan B in scale to change household behaviour over the long term? Kathy, I think that one's a good one for you.
Yes. Yep, but look, it's... as I say, it's going to have to be a staged campaign. You can't talk to the community about everything all in one hit. So there will have to be stages to it. We will have to evaluate it and assess it and then go back out and do it again and work obviously closely so that we're not clashing, but I guess supporting and channeling the communications between us and B-Cycle as well for this state. So yes, we'll be a la Tosser. Certainly all of that behavioural research work has been done the same as TOSSA, and the evaluation and continual improvement processes are in place as well.
Great. Was there anything you wanted to add, Libby? No?
I think that covers it.
No, covered. Good. We aren't the only country facing these issues. What lessons can we learn from other jurisdictions to reduce and manage this risk of fires from batteries? Libby, did you want to talk to your relationships with other schemes across the world and what we learn?
Yeah, well, B-Cycle's been working with internationally for some time. We've been going to the International Battery Recycling Congress since 2017. I'm on the steering committee for that conference, and the beauty of that is that the other steering committee members are all in a similar role to myself, and it's just been an incredibly useful forum in which to get good information. And you know, I mentioned the drop-off point code of practice, for example, that came directly from Belgium. You know, I went to Belgium and sat down with BBAT, and they showed me all the different tools that they were employing. And so we've been able to apply that. Obviously, we've adapted it to our own circumstances, but that drop-off point code of practice has been a really key one. I think there's also new guidelines coming out of EUCOBAT, which is the European Association of Schemes across the country, across the EU. We were the first international member of that group. So we now have access to their portal, so we see all of the standards that are coming through and can access those and provide input to it as well. So we are very much involved at that international level, and I think it is critical because, you know, it is obviously an issue that's being faced everywhere. But it's a bit of a two-way exchange too. They see things that we're doing in a different way and taking on board some of the things that we're employing as well. And certainly, I think it's going to continue as standards evolve, and you know they're grappling. Surprisingly, they're still grappling with some of the hard issues that we've been grappling with as well. And so things like, for example, the battery passport, but also standards for calculating recovery rates. I just had assumed when we started talking with them 3 or 4 years ago that they would have a very clear standard for calculating recovery rates, but they were really focused on collection rates. And so the work that we did early on to really move in that direction and have good standards was an important piece for that. They're now just moving into developing standards, and so it'll be good to see where that goes, and we'll definitely be reviewing what we're doing in that context. And I think the more that we can have internationally harmonised approaches to all of these things too, the better and more efficient we'll be.
Great. Thanks, Libby. Anything else? Anyone want to add?
Yeah, so we also recently had the New York Fire Department come out to Australia. So Fire Rescue New South Wales have been doing a lot of leading work in this space with a tiny budget. So they've been punching well above their weight on the global scene. But yeah, New York has been one of the leading fire departments when it comes to battery fires and especially EV fires. So they were recently out here doing a whole range of meetings with government and Fire Rescue New South Wales, collaborating a lot. And there was a huge international contingent at the AFAC conference, and I can't remember what AFAC stands for, but it's basically the Australian Firefighters Conference. So there is still a lot of work being done, but Australia is actually one of the leaders in this space for firefighting in that area.
That's really cool to know. Okay, this one's for the EPA. How will you be able to enforce the new legislation for problematic products that are illegal and don't have a product owner? I dare say this is the vape conversation.
Yes. So free riders will be compelled to comply. It's an offence not to participate, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Everyone that supplies a product will need to register, so we'll have oversight of the legal market. In time, it will take a while for people to register. And there will be enforcement and compliance. So we have experience from this with our plastics reforms. There were a series of bans of problematic single-use plastic materials. We receive intelligence from walking around, looking at shelves, monitoring online platforms and engaging with them. Looking overseas, and intelligence from people doing the right thing when they see other people not doing the right thing. So we'll have a monitoring program and invest in the enforcement and compliance.
I think we also have a pretty good handle on a lot of the free riders too, and so we will be working with the New South Wales EPA and others to make sure that they're aware of who those people are.
Yeah, no, great. And the other part of that aspect was products that are illegal. So yeah, is there any comment you can make around any plans around vapes?
We know they're out there,
Yeah.
and we know they're of varying quality. You can make these things so cheaply, and because they're cheap, they often don't have the quality and safety management system, which is one of the reasons that we're seeing these fires. We really want them to be collected. We want the collection points to take them, and it's an exercise that we'll need to do to find out where they're coming from. But the collection of those things is really paramount for us.
Yeah. Good.
I can say that at the community recycling centres, where we've got the trial happening at the moment for collection of embedded batteries, vapes are included in that. So at the moment, we're covering the cost for collecting and recycling those vapes.
Yeah, I mean, by default, yeah, we know we're not going to collect levies on that, so someone has to pay, and yeah, I'm sure that we'll work that out as time goes on, but it is another risk, and it's something that everyone does want out of community and recycled, so we will definitely find a way to make sure that happens, I'm sure. What do we do with the water used to put out lithium-ion batteries? Are there concerns about heavy metals? So I might pass this on to you, Zoltan, because you've put out a few fires on your facility. What happens to the water?
The water has to be, generally it would be an abundant area, right? So the water needs to be collected and then processed separately. It is contaminated depending on, you know, what sort of fire, what sort of chemistry you're dealing with. It's a standard procedure. So we get the fire department to give us the whole drum with all the water, and it gets down, processed at, well, there's a number of processes around, so there's an avenue of doing it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Zoltan. I might, leave it there. You can certainly speak to the fireys maybe to see how it gets managed in a public arena.
I might just jump in there if that's all right.
Sorry, no, go ahead, Phoebe, sorry. I shouldn't have assumed anything.
So yes, we are concerned about the heavy metals. Where, in terms of the way first responders are exposed to them, but also their impact or the risk of impact on the environment. So when these products go into a landfill, there is a risk that the lining could be breached and the heavy metals could travel off-site in the groundwater. So that is a risk that we're also managing.
Yeah, no, definitely. How can we manage the risks and recycling capabilities when a large collector, Cleanaway, had a fire at St Mary's that shut down the CRC network for Sydney, including battery collections? Just to clarify, that fire wasn't caused by batteries, but obviously it did affect the collection network. I'll pass it over to EPA first to describe how they managed it, the communications, I suppose, and got things back online as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so the communications were a bit tricky with that because not all community recycling centres closed down. Those that did closed at all different times. Some just were accepting reduced quantities or some materials, but not other materials. So, and so it was different for, depending, your experience as a resident was different depending on where you were in the state. And of course, ETS Remondis are also our contractors and their network was fine. So the communications around that were quite challenging. Thankfully, all the community recycling centres are now back open and accepting all materials again, and the household chemical clean-out events also restarted, I think, on the 10th of May. So it is all back up and running. But yeah, that was absolutely a challenging time. We were providing regular communications to all of the councils, but yeah, there's always more you can do to be providing that information. It was really difficult because you know, things like the household chemical clean-out events, communities have had those going on now for more than 20 years. And so, you know, they get in their rates notice that it's coming up on the 10th of March or whatever it is. No matter how many local radio interviews we do, we can't get everybody to check with their local council before that event happens just to double check that it's still on, because their experience for the last 20 years is that that event is on. That's my time. Yeah, the communications were definitely very challenging. We and the councils did everything that we could to let the communities know, but yeah, it's not terrific when we have stops to services or reduction in services. Yeah.
Brett, is there anything you'd like to add to that with your members and how they responded?
Yeah, look, I mean, one of the big issues is just the lack of infrastructure across multiple waste streams that we have across Sydney. So having more infrastructure and more contingency plans. I guess my main comment to that one there is work being done there. Steve Beeman at the EPA is heading up some work looking at waste risks and contingency plans across not just battery fires, but a whole raft of different scenarios that could potentially happen. So that work's ongoing. I'm not sure when the final resolution of that work's going to be, but there is stuff happening in the background to look at that. It's just unfortunate that this particular incident occurred. But like we already mentioned, like Remondis was still running. So there was still capacity in the system. It was just how do we transport safely to keep it running through.
And just to add, the retail collection network was not impacted on, right? So those battery collection bins were open all along, so people had options.
Good addition, Zoltan. And I imagine waste was still collected in that time. Rubbish bins weren't left at homes, I imagine. It's amazing how resilient and how, government keeps things moving when they really have to. Question, where should residents take damaged batteries? It's a really tough one.
So we do accept damaged batteries at the community recycling centres and through the clean out events, so they can still take them there.
Great, thank you.
No, I think damaged batteries are definitely a challenge, and our network is not equipped to take damaged batteries, so it's important to be aware of that. We have proposed in B-Cycle 2.0 to include a network for damaged batteries, and so that's obviously a really important piece, is being able to implement those eco-modulated levies so that we have the funding available to actually provide some infrastructure in that regard. There's also one of those questions there, can a battery still combust if it's flat and has no charge? I think the research out of Europe that I've just been coming across is that even though it appears to have no charge, those batteries still have between 60 and 90% charge. And so, yes, that can still be a problem. And also, even if it has low charge and it's compacted or pierced or damaged, it can still be a problem.
So if I just might add, the only time when a battery is safe in a discharge state is when you short the terminals, the positive and negative. Don't short it when it's still under charge, right? So you cause a problem. But if you would know that it is flat, and I suggest that most people don't have a multimeter, so it's very difficult to determine if the battery is actually down to zero. With batteries, what people are talking about, when they actually talk about batteries that are empty, they're not at zero state of voltage, right? So zero state of charge is roughly 25% above the rate that it needs to be able to regenerate, right? So when your battery is empty and your equipment switches off, it switches off based on a voltage reading, not on the capacity of the battery that's left. So the battery that you remove out of your device potentially has a charge. Don't assume that it discharged.
Thanks. This one's mostly for you, Brett. What is the focus on training, risk management and monitoring for facility operators? For others, what's the role of EPA, BSC on supporting industry to mitigate risk? So we'll start with you, Brett, and then move on.
So it really depends on the facility. So not all facilities are created equal. Anyone that's been to, well, if we just talk about MRFs, there's not many two MRFs that are exactly the same. They'll have different access points, they'll have different equipment on site, more space to work with, less space to work with, different bunded areas. So really actually tailor the focus of the training specific to the facility if we're actually heading out to a facility and working with a particular team. One facility we actually combined with Fire Rescue New South Wales. So we're on site with Fire Rescue New South Wales because we're training the local fire crews and the local MRF operators. What's going to happen, how we're going to work together to solve the problem. So the focus of the training is tailor-made for the particular site. We definitely look at the fire risks and where it's most likely to occur, tipping floor, the various conveyor belts, the different processes. Where are the different human interventions? So obviously some MRFs are incredibly manual, other MRFs are quite robotic. So the risk profile and where that risk lies is different in every different process. We really ram home the risk of the gas and the risk of the heat. The residual heat that comes off these fires can spark spot fires at different facilities and MRFs. So we definitely tailor make it. I can't really stress that more, that what I do for one facility is not going to be the same for the next facility, because it would be inappropriate, because I'll have different measures, different pieces to work with, and also different budgets. I can roll out a Rolls-Royce program and then they'll never use it. So we need to also work within what means do they have, but it's really around protecting the people first and then the asset second. Assets can be replaced, people take a bit longer.
Yeah, well said. I'll pass on to maybe, I don't know, Zoltan to talk about training. Or Kathy. Kathy, you've got the... Yep.
Well, the training that I can talk to is for our community recycling centres and the workers who manage those. So we do have an operations manual and we have training. A community recycling centre can't open until the staff have been trained, but we're always working to improve all of that. So we're also working with Fire Rescue New South Wales, with our tech team, with our ops team, and with our contractors to improve safety and training for the staff at those sites. For the household chemical clean out events, they are manned by the Cleanaway staff, so people don't even get out of their car. You just drive up, open the boot, and the chemists who are on site manage, and the Cleanaway staff manage all of those. So we don't provide training to them, that's provided by Cleanaway.
Yeah, thank you. Anything you'd like to add, Zoltan, with your facility?
And obviously we work with Cleanaway, right? So there's a lot of industry discussion on what the best procedures are, what the training is required on site. We train our own people. There is not a set manual that you can give out and go, no, you're qualified. We're currently looking at the various aspects through the TAFE system that can be provided. So the Centre of Excellence in Queensland, for example, provides some training for the work that we try to do. They're mainly working with people who are working in the EV industry, but the same sort of logic and the safeties and everything else applies to us as well. And eventually that information is going to go and progress through the industry as such.
Yeah, thank you. It's one thing I like about this space. There's a lot of sharing of knowledge and expertise. One for you, Libby. Will B-Cycle join the New South Wales mandatory scheme? It's not quite worded correctly, but I suppose how will B-Cycle interact with the legislation, the mandated legislation?
I think the New South Wales Government and Penny Sharp in particular is to be congratulated for taking action on this front, and we've been really pleased to work with the New South Wales EPA and provide feedback on what we see as the important elements of a regulated environment. We are yet to see the regulation, and so the scheme itself hasn't made the decision to join, but I would find it very hard to imagine a scenario in which we would not join. We've been advocating for this for a long time, and it's, from our perspective, in order to properly address this risk, it will be an essential part of the future.
Thank you. Moving to the next one, how do we deal with regulations for products being purchased through Temu and Amazon and being imported directly from unknown suppliers?
So where products are coming through the online platforms, so Amazon, eBay, Temu, they can support with identifying the products on there that could be problematic or that meet requirements. So they have tools available there. For the products that are from an independent importer, that's much more challenging and something that we'll need to invest in the intelligence to help us find them. We'll be using our lessons from our plastics reforms where there were bans and phase-outs as a start, but I think this will be quite different.
Thanks for that.
I'll just add to that a little bit as well. Having worked very closely with Border Force around other illegal imports and stuff, it's incredibly difficult to manage the amount of illegal products that are actually coming into this country, either through the ports, through the airport, etc. people are very crafty with how they're bringing in stuff into this country. I could tell you plenty of stories, but I don't want to give you ideas. But, you know, to be fair, it's going to be incredibly difficult. Like if we just take vapes as the poster child here, you know, vapes are effectively banned. I can jump online, I could buy a box of vapes today if I wanted to. It's not difficult, it's very easy. And they'll either come in via a ship in a container, they'll come in someone's luggage on an aeroplane, they'll come in a cargo plane, might come in a little dinghy from Indonesia somewhere. They're always one step ahead, so I don't think we're ever going to get perfect. And I think it's important not to have that expectation that EPA is going to pass a rule or legislation and it's going to stop it, because it's not. It hasn't worked with drugs, it's not going to work with vapes. So it's a really difficult problem. And Border Force would be lucky to get 10% of what is bought in illegally. That's across all products, so drugs and everything. If we just look at the tobacco industry, the amount of illegal tobacco that comes in every single day is astronomical.
And I suppose that's why this discussion is really focused on risk and risk mitigation, making sure at every step we are putting in some barriers to try and mitigate.
And even in states that have been regulated for a long time, Belgium, for example, they're still only recovering 80 to 90% of the potential batteries. So as Brett suggests, we're not going to get to 100%. So we need a system-wide solution at each stage of a battery's life cycle.
Yeah. This is something that the panel, we get asked quite a bit, and we've discussed it. Would a CDS-CDL program work? It would need to be a meaningful dollar amount to encourage use of the program.
It could work. It's an option available to us. We've designed the framework to scale up if needed. The community uses the container deposit scheme in New South Wales. 13 billion containers have been returned. People use it and they enjoy using it. We're not looking at a refund at the moment. It's a different risk profile to a beverage container. And there are other incentives that could be available to us. So we have designed the framework that is an option for us. And there's also targets that could be set in the framework as well to help with that.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Zoltan, as to...
So our big challenge with the batteries is their risk profile at home, right? As I don't know who spoke about the batteries at home or in the car left behind. Yeah, that was yours.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Kathy.
Yeah. So the problem we have is that the residual charge in the battery is still going to be present, right? The discharge rate, the self-discharge rate is very low. So what happens at the moment with bottles that I see in my neighbourhood is that people have those beautiful big bags and they accumulate their bottles. We expect that people would accumulate batteries at home. Now, unless we're going to have behavioural change right from the point and they know what to do with the batteries, how to isolate them, how to determine if they're empty, and not mix them up, you don't want to transfer the risk of the batteries being held into the home, because we're going to end up with fires at home, right? So we're making choices. Certainly there's options, I'm not saying no. On larger batteries, e-mobility batteries or hand tool batteries, right? Bunnings ran a small trial on taking batteries back. That was very successful, but it needs resources. It needs extra people to administer the system, and then making sure that their program should reward people who are buying the product at their stores, right? Not bringing the free rider products. So there's a complexity behind it that makes it difficult to go, yes, it's going to work. Technically, yeah, it could work, but we all would need to agree that consumers know what they're doing in the first place.
All right, we're at time. I know we've got a number of other questions, but you might need to catch up with our panellists separately if they're burning. But please join me in thanking our panellists for joining in on this important discussion. I think it's time for lunch.